My daughter-in-law moved into my house with a smile on her face and a suitcase in each hand. 3 years later, she moved out, but not the way she planned. And the morning she came back to finish what she started, she walked straight into something she never saw coming. I want you to picture my dining room table, the one with the hand-stitched runner my mother made in 1962, the one where 4 generations of my family have sat down for Sunday supper. Now picture that table set for a very special breakfast. Fine china, fresh coffee, biscuits still warm from the oven, and sitting at the head of it where my late husband Raymond used to sit was not me. But for you to understand who was sitting in that chair, you need to understand how we got there. My name is Dorothy Mae Calloway. I am 67 years old. I live in a pale yellow house on Sycamore Road in Greenville, South Carolina, the same house Raymond and I bought in 1987 with money we saved dollar by dollar for 11 years. I am a retired school librarian. I keep a garden in the backyard, tomatoes, collard greens, marigolds along the fence. I make my own preserves every August. I go to Calvary Baptist on Sunday mornings and sit in the fourth pew on the left because that is where I have always sat. I am not a complicated woman. I believe in hard work. I believe in being decent to people. And for most of my life, I believe that if you raised your child right, if you poured enough love into him, enough patience, enough prayer, that love would protect him from the world. I was wrong about that last part. My son Marcus is 39 years old. He has his father's eyes, deep brown, serious, the kind of eyes that make you feel seen when he looks at you. He was a gentle boy, quiet. He used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them bouquets. He read every book in the school library by the time he was 12. I used to joke that he lived inside his own head, that boy. But I said it with pride because the world inside his head was a kind one. He met Vanessa at a work conference in Charlotte. He called me the night after, and I could hear it in his voice before he said a single word. That low, almost embarrassed happiness of a man who has been surprised by his own heart. "Mom, I met someone. She's brilliant," he said. "She's the sharpest person in any room." I believed him. I had no reason not to. Vanessa was beautiful in the way that makes you a little nervous. She had a quick smile and quick eyes, and she had the gift of making you feel, in the first 5 minutes of knowing her, that she had chosen you specifically, that you were somehow special to her. At our first meeting, she complimented my garden, asked about my preserves, said her own grandmother used to put up fig jam every fall, and wasn't that something? The two of us having that in common. I remember thinking, Marcus found himself a good one. They were married 18 months later. A small ceremony at Calvary Baptist. I wore the blue dress I bought for Raymond's retirement dinner. I cried, but they were good tears, the kind that come when something you prayed for finally arrives. For the first year, things were fine. They had an apartment downtown. Marcus was working as an architect at a firm he'd been with for 6 years. Vanessa worked in finance. Investment analysis, she said, though she never explained it in a way I quite understood. They came for Sunday dinner twice a month. I sent them home with containers of food. Everything felt the way it was supposed to feel. Then Raymond died. It was a Wednesday morning in March. He had gone out to check on his tomato seedlings. We always started them early indoors, and he simply sat down in the garden chair and did not get up again. His heart, the doctor said, peaceful, they said, as though that word was supposed to smooth over the fact that the man I had spent 41 years beside was gone before I could even say goodbye. Marcus was there within the hour. He held my hand at the hospital and didn't say anything, just sat with me, and I was grateful for that silence more than I can say. He was so much like his father in that moment that it broke something open in me. It was Vanessa who suggested, 3 months after the funeral, that they move in with me. She framed it as concern. "Dorothy, this house is too big for one person. You shouldn't be alone. We've been talking, Marcus and I, and we think it makes sense. We could save on rent, you'd have company, and honestly," her voice softened there, warm and reasonable, "it would give me such peace of mind knowing you weren't by yourself. I want to be honest with you about this." I had a feeling. Not a thought, not a reason I could have named, just a small, quiet unease that I pushed down because I told myself I was being uncharitable. because Raymond was gone and the house was very quiet, because Marcus was my son and I wanted him close, because Vanessa had been nothing but kind to me. I said yes. The first sign was small enough that I almost missed it. 2 weeks after they moved in, I came downstairs early to start coffee and found that the kitchen had been rearranged. Not dramatically, just my cast iron skillet moved to a different cabinet, the dish towels in a new drawer, the spice rack reorganized alphabetically. It's just more efficient this way, Vanessa said when she came down and found me standing in the middle of my own kitchen trying to find my measuring cups. I hope that's okay. I said, of course, it's fine. No problem at all. I should have said, this is my kitchen. I have known where everything belongs for 30 years, but I didn't, and that was the beginning. Over the following months, the changes came steadily, each one small enough to wave away, all of them adding up to something I couldn't quite name. She replaced the curtains in the living room, the ones I'd had since 1995, with modern linen panels that let in too much light. She started referring to the guest room as our office and moved Raymond's desk out to the garage to make space. She began hosting her friends on Saturday afternoons, women I didn't know who spoke in quick, bright voices about things that had nothing to do with me. And I would find myself retreating to my bedroom like a visitor in my own home. And Marcus, my gentle, quiet son, said nothing. When I mentioned the curtains, he said, "Babe has good taste, Mom. Doesn't it look nice?" When I said I'd like Raymond's desk back inside, he said, "The garage is fine for it. We need the room." He said these things kindly without thinking, the way you say something when you haven't really heard the question. I told myself, this is what it is, to share a house. I told myself, she means well. I told myself, Raymond would say, pick your battles, Dorothy. The financial piece started quietly, too. Vanessa handled the household accounts. She was the one in finance, after all. It made sense. She paid the utilities from a shared account they'd set up, and for a long time, I didn't look closely at the numbers because I trusted her. When I finally did look, when a statement came to the house addressed to me about a line of credit I didn't remember opening, I found things that took my breath away. The line of credit had been opened in my name 14 months earlier. It had been drawn down to nearly its limit. There were charges I didn't recognize. There were transfers I couldn't account for. When I brought the statement to Marcus and laid it on the table in front of him, his face went through confusion, then discomfort, then something that looked terribly close to shame. He said, "I'm sure there's an explanation. Let me talk to her." I said, "Marcus, this is my name on this account. This is my credit." He said, "Mom, please don't make this a thing. She handles all our finances. It was probably just easier to," I said, "Son, look at me." He looked, and in his eyes I saw what I had been refusing to see for over a year. Not malice, not cruelty, but a kind of helplessness that was almost worse. He had been slowly, steadily changed into a man who could not look his own mother in the eye and call what he was seeing by its right name. Vanessa's explanation, when it came, was smooth and confident. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, the one with my mother's runner, and she explained that she had consolidated some of their expenses under my credit line because the interest rate was better, that she fully intended to pay it back, that she was sorry she hadn't explained it first. "But honestly, Dorothy, I thought you'd understand since we're all family here." She said the word family with such practiced ease that it almost worked. Almost. I said I wanted the account closed and repaid within 60 days. She said, of course, absolutely, and smiled. And that was the night that something shifted in how she looked at me. The warmth didn't disappear. Vanessa was too careful for that. But underneath it, for the first time, I could see the calculation. Things were colder after that, polite but measured. She stopped asking about my garden. She stopped complimenting my cooking. She and Marcus ate dinner in their room more nights than not, and when I passed her in the hallway, there was a briskness to her now, a slight tightening around the eyes that she couldn't quite control. The account was not repaid in 60 days. When I asked about it, she said they were working on it. When I asked again a month later, Marcus got up from the table and left the room, and Vanessa looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, patient, almost pitying. The way you might look at someone who keeps asking a question they should already know the answer to. She said, "Dorothy, we're doing our best. I would appreciate it if you could be a little more understanding." I sat with that for a long time after she left the kitchen. I sat with the fact that the woman who had moved into my house, rearranged my kitchen, removed my husband's desk from his own office, opened credit in my name without asking, and spent money that was not hers, had just asked me to be more understanding. And I thought about Raymond. I thought about what he used to say, "Dorothy, you are the most patient woman I have ever known." And then he would add, quieter, "Sometimes I worry you are too patient." I went to bed that night with Raymond's words in my head and a decision beginning to form somewhere underneath all of it. The actual breaking point, the moment everything became clear, came on a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks later. I had been in the garden after dinner, cutting marigolds for the kitchen table. I came in through the back door and stopped in the hallway because I could hear Vanessa's voice in the living room, low and quick, the tone she used on business calls. I wasn't trying to listen. I was just standing there with dirt on my hands and flowers in my fist. I heard her say, "Not going to be a problem. The house is in both our names now." I stood very still. I heard her say, "She's old, she's alone, she's not going to fight it." I heard her say, "Marcus will do what I tell him." I put the marigolds down on the kitchen counter. I went to the little bathroom off the hallway, and I ran cold water over my wrists the way my mother taught me when I was upset. And I looked in the mirror, and the woman looking back at me had Raymond's voice in her head saying, "Too patient." I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark in the room I had shared with Raymond for 34 years, in the house we had saved for and scrimped for and loved into shape with our own hands, and I listened to the night settle around me, the refrigerator hum, the oak tree outside the window, the sound of my own breathing going slow and deliberate, the way it does when I am not afraid but deciding. I thought, I am 67 years old and I am not going to lose this house. I thought, Raymond did not work himself to the bone so that a woman with quick eyes and a practiced smile could call it hers. I thought, my son is in that room down the hall and he is not gone yet, no matter what it looks like, because I know my boy, I know who he was before he forgot. And then I thought about who I needed to call. The first call was to my sister-in-law, Claudette, Raymond's sister, 20 years a paralegal, before she retired, the woman who has known me since I was 24 years old and has never once told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was more useful. She picked up on the second ring even though it was past 11. I told her everything. The account, the deed comment, all of it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dorothy, do you have a real estate attorney?" I said, "I have Harold Sims. He handled the house when we bought it." She said, "Call him first thing in the morning. And Dat, don't say a word to either of them." Not yet. The second call was to my pastor, Reverend Willis. He had known Marcus since he was baptized at Calvary. He had presided at Raymond's funeral. He was, in the way that the best pastors are, a man of God who also understood perfectly well how the world worked. I told him what I needed, not comfort, not prayer, though I knew he would pray anyway. I needed him at my kitchen table on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, which was 4 days away. I needed his presence, his history with my family, his weight. He said, "I will be there, Dorothy. What time do you want me to bring the biscuits?" I almost smiled at that. I said, "I'll make the biscuits, Reverend. You just bring yourself." The third call was harder. I dialed my son's number and sat in the dark listening to it ring and ring, and when it went to voicemail, I didn't leave a message. I just sat there for a moment with the phone in my hand, thinking about the boy who brought me dandelions and called them bouquets, and I said out loud to the empty room, "I'm doing this for you too, baby, even if you can't see it yet." I did not sleep, but I did not need to. There is a particular kind of wakefulness that comes when you have stopped being afraid and started being clear. And that is what I had that night. Clarity, cold and clean, the way the air smells after a hard rain. At 4 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen. I got out my mixing bowls. I got out the flour and the butter and the buttermilk. I turned on the small lamp over the stove and worked by its light, my hands moving through the familiar motions. Cut the butter into the flour, work it with your fingers until it's like coarse sand. Make the well in the center, pour in the buttermilk slowly. The rhythm of it steadied me. This kitchen, this table, these hands, all of it mine, all of it Raymond's, all of it ours. While the first pan was in the oven, I went to the small drawer in the hall table where I keep important papers. I took out the original deed to the house. I looked at the names on it, Raymond Lee Calloway and Dorothy May Calloway, and I looked at them for a long time. I had spoken to Harold Sims first thing Wednesday morning, as Claudette told me to. He had been clear and quick and thorough in the way of men who have been doing something for 40 years and have no patience left for unnecessary words. He told me exactly what to do, and I had done it. I put the deed back in its envelope and I set it on the dining room table right in the center, next to the bud vase with the marigold I had cut from my garden. Then I set 4 places at the table with the good china. I pressed the linen tablecloth, the one with my mother's embroidered border, and spread it carefully, smoothing out every crease with the flat of my hand. I polished the silver that Raymond's mother left me. I made a pot of coffee and set it on the warmer. I arranged the biscuits on the white platter that has been in this house since 1991. When the grandfather clock in the hallway read 7:45, I went upstairs and got dressed. I put on my navy church dress. I pinned my hair. I put on the small pearl earrings Raymond gave me for our 20th anniversary. I did not try to cover the exhaustion on my face. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman who had been awake all night making a decision and was at peace with it. At 8:55, I heard the first knock. I opened the door to Reverend Willis, who was a large man with a preacher's voice and a grandfather's face, and behind him, to my specific and deliberate invitation, was Claudette, still sharp at 71, dressed for business in her gray blazer, her reading glasses on a chain around her neck. And beside her, holding a manila folder with a rubber band around it, was Harold Sims. Claudette looked at my face for a moment. She reached out and pressed my hand once, firmly, and said nothing. I said, "Good morning. The coffee is ready. Please come in." I heard Marcus in the kitchen before I heard Vanessa. He came in first, half awake in sweatpants, clearly expecting the usual quiet Saturday morning, and he stopped dead when he saw the dining room, the tablecloth, the china, the biscuits. Reverend Willis sitting in the chair to my right, Claudette across from him, Harold Sims at the end. He looked at me, his father's eyes blinking slowly, trying to read what he was seeing. I said, "Good morning, baby. Sit down. There's coffee." He sat. He didn't say anything yet. He was watching my face with a look I recognized, the same look he had as a small boy when he knew something serious was happening and was trying to understand it. Vanessa came in a minute later. She had taken time to get dressed, which told me she had heard voices and prepared herself. She was in a crisp white blouse, her hair neat, her expression calibrated to pleasant surprise. Her eyes moved quickly around the table. Reverend Willis, Claudette, Harold, the manila folder, and I watched the pleasant surprise recalibrate into something more guarded, though her smile did not waver. "Good morning," she said. "Dorothy." I didn't know we were having company. I said, "Sit down, Vanessa." She sat. She looked at me, and there was the calculation again, right at the surface now, no longer bothering to hide itself. Reverend Willis folded his hands on the table. He looked at Marcus the way a man looks when he has known someone since childhood and is genuinely grieved by what he has to say. He said, "Marcus, I've been your pastor for 35 years. I baptized you. I buried your father. And I am here this morning because your mother asked me to be, and because what happens in this room today matters to the health of this family and to the man I believe you still want to be." Marcus had gone very still. Claudette opened the manila folder. She removed a single sheet of paper and set it on the table in front of Vanessa without drama, without heat, with the precise and practiced calm of a woman who has spent 2 decades in law offices. She said, "This is a forensic accounting summary prepared at Dorothy's request over the past 4 days. It documents withdrawals and transfers from a credit account opened in Dorothy's name without her documented consent, totaling $14,260. It also documents 3 attempts to access the property deed through an online county records portal using login credentials that were not Dorothy's." The room was very quiet. Vanessa said, "That is completely—" Claudette said, "I'm not finished." She set down a second sheet. She said, "This is a signed statement from an attorney specializing in elder financial exploitation. It outlines the applicable South Carolina statutes. It is not theoretical. It is a prepared brief." Harold Sims put his hand on the manila folder and said, quietly, that he had filed a formal notification with the county that morning regarding the deed, and that any further attempts to alter, access, or contest the property title would trigger an immediate response. Marcus turned to look at Vanessa. He turned slowly, the way you turn when you don't want to see what you're about to see. He said her name. Just her name, in a voice I had not heard from him since he was 7 years old, and had broken Raymond's watch, and came to me already knowing that he had done something that couldn't be undone. Vanessa was still looking at me. Her smile was gone now. In its place was something that I think was the first honest expression I had ever seen on her face. Not anger, not fear exactly, but the look of someone who has run a very precise calculation and arrived at an answer they didn't expect. She said, "Dorothy, we are family. I want you to remember that." I looked at her for a moment. Then I picked up my coffee cup and took a slow sip, and I set it back down on its saucer. And I said, "The word family means something specific to me, Vanessa. It means Raymond working double shifts for 3 years so we can make this down payment. It means me grading papers at this table at midnight so we can keep the lights on when things got hard. It means my son growing up in this house knowing that the people who loved him would not lie to him and would not take from him. That is what family means in this house. And what you have been doing in this house, quietly, carefully, for the better part of 2 years, is not that." She started to speak. I kept going. I said, "I want you to hear me clearly because I am only going to say this once. The account will be repaid in full. Harold has the payment schedule. You will sign a formal acknowledgement today before you leave this table because Harold has the paperwork for that as well. The deed is not in question and will not be made to be in question. And this arrangement of you and Marcus living in this house is over." Marcus made a sound. I looked at him. I said, "Son, I need you to listen to me, not to her, and not to the version of yourself that has been answering to her for the past 2 years. I need you to listen to your mother." He was crying by then. Quietly, the way he used to cry as a boy when he was trying not to let it show. He said, "Mom, I didn't know about all of it. I swear to you, I didn't know about the account." I looked at him for a long time. I looked at his father's eyes, red and ashamed and present, finally present in a way they hadn't been in longer than I wanted to think about. I said, "I believe you didn't know everything, but you knew something wasn't right and you chose not to look. And baby, I need you to understand that there is a cost to not looking. There is a cost to keeping the peace by letting the wrong things go quiet. Your father knew that. I need you to know it too." Reverend Willis put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Vanessa signed the acknowledgement. She did it without another word, which I think was the smartest thing she had done since she walked into my house, because Harold Sims had the look of a man with a great deal of additional paperwork available if needed. She stood up from the table, and she looked at Marcus, and something passed between them that I can't fully name, not the end of everything maybe, but a reckoning. The beginning of him seeing what he had allowed. She left. The sound of the front door closing was not loud. It was just final. The 4 of us sat at my table for a while after that. Reverend Willis had a biscuit with peach preserves. Claudette poured herself more coffee. Harold organized his papers back into the manila folder with the efficiency of a man who has many more Saturday mornings of this work ahead of him. I sat at the head of the table where Raymond used to sit, and I looked at the marigold in the bud vase and I let myself breathe. Marcus stayed. He stayed all day, and we talked, really talked, more than we had in 2 years. And some of what he told me was hard to hear, and some of what I told him was hard for him to hear, and we did not fix everything that morning. Some things do not get fixed at a breakfast table. But we started. The house is quiet now. Not the hollow, watchful quiet of those last 2 years, but my quiet, the quiet of a home that belongs to itself again. Marcus lives across town in an apartment he found quickly, with the determination I recognized as grief working itself into action. He calls me every Sunday morning and comes for dinner on the first Saturday of each month. He is in counseling. He is finding his way back to something, though I think he is still figuring out exactly what. Vanessa repaid the account, every dollar. On the schedule, Harold set. I have not spoken to her since that Saturday morning. I go out to my garden in the evenings and I cut marigolds for the kitchen table. I make my preserves. I sit in my fourth pew at Calvary Baptist on Sunday mornings. The grandfather clock ticks in the hallway, and the light comes through the living room windows, my curtains again, the ones I put back up in October, and falls on my mother's table runner, and on the deed to this house, which has my name on it, and on the photograph of Raymond on the bookshelf, who is smiling the way he always smiled, like he knew something good was just around the corner. I think about what I used to believe, that love alone was enough to protect the people you raised. I don't believe that anymore. Love is not enough if it doesn't have a spine. Love without boundaries is just permission, and I gave permission for too long through silence, through patience, through the particular stubbornness of a mother who cannot stop believing in her child, even when the evidence is sitting right there in a statement from the bank. But I also think this, my son is still here. He is finding his way. And I am still in this house, in Raymond's chair at my mother's table. That, I have decided, is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. So I'll ask you, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting what was yours? Between staying quiet and standing in your own dining room at your own table, in front of the people who built your world with you, and finally saying, no more? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if this story meant something to you, a like goes a long way toward helping me keep bringing you stories like this one. There are more right there on your screen. I'll see you in the next one.